Welcome to our first instalment of the Ground Rules. This is a new series where we will be chatting briefly on land-related topics and hoping to demystify issues, give tips and raise important considerations when thinking about development. So today we're talking about some of the challenges and some positive outcomes as a result of an increase in non-standard registered providers entering the market. And I've got Joe Davies here with me, who is one of the associates in our land team. So, Joe, what do we mean by a non-standard registered provider?
So we mean for-profit private company that obviously owns and sells affordable housing. Obviously, there's different types of what we call registered providers and people who deal with social housing, and those are local authorities. And also, you've got not-for-profit registered providers as well.
Brilliant. So when we're talking about a non-standard RP, we're probably really talking about your for-profit registered provider, aren't we? Who's a private company. Yeah, great. So there are blockers, aren't there, when we're talking about delivery of sales of affordable housing. So why are there blockers on delivery and sales relating to affordable housing?
Lucy, that's a really good question, to be honest with you. And really, it comes down to finance of RPs and the availability of funding. Obviously, in most recent times, RPs have found it difficult to raise funding to take on the affordable housing that developers are building. Obviously, this is due to rising construction costs and actually the cost of housing going up, and that's obviously contributed to by a slow planning process, those rising construction costs I've just mentioned. And obviously, RPs know what the situation is in terms of developers having issues in terms of getting rid of their Section 106 units. They are putting in less competitive bids. So it's leaving house builders with a bigger housing or Section 106 housing stock. So all in all, those are the blockers.
Yeah, and I think that the issue really then is that if the house builder can't deliver on the Section 106, then really what do? You've got to go back to the local authority, haven't you, to look at changing the mix or changing your build program. Because if you've got, say, okay, I need to build so many units by a certain point before I can occupy my private units, you get a bit stuck, don't you? So it can cause quite a bit of a congestion and a bit of pressure on the house builder.
I know, and then they have to look at alternative ways around that with the local authority, who might not be receptive to whatever suggestions the developer might have. Those suggestions sometimes include maybe offering cash payments to obviously reduce the amount of affordable that needs to be delivered, to be honest with you. And really the push from government is, especially now, is to increase the affordable housing numbers. So it is a really interesting space at the moment.
Okay, so when we're thinking about non-standard RPs, what's the challenge to the developer really for accepting an offer from essentially somebody in the private sector looking to make some money this way?
Really interested again that the big focus point of this question is finances, to be honest with you. So, and covenant strength. Obviously, in terms of if you're looking at development agreement, what a house builder wants to know is that the RP or non-standard RP in this case will be able to perform on their financial completion points within that development agreement. So just to make sure of that, what house builders need to do is obviously do checks surrounding the non-standard RP's financial covenant strength. And also there's obviously other challenges that face accepting offers from non-standard RPs, such as obviously they need approval from the local authority, that there's time issues surrounding that, and house builders might not have gone through that process with a non-standard RP in the past, and obviously they'll need to assist that non-standard RP, maybe some of the requirements of the local authority. Local authorities might have different criteria for acceptance of that non-standard RP, so it can be quite tricky, especially when there's timescales within the planning agreement for delivery of the affordable units.
Yeah, and I guess there's things like there's reputation risk, isn't there? Especially when you're talking about a house builder, they've got their reputation in the market. If they're then seen with an RP that perhaps isn't providing a good service to the end user, then that's going to ultimately impact upon the developer, isn't it? And probably then, you might have issues with your local authority in terms of that approval, because if a local authority has come across that RP before and thought, well, actually, we don't like the way they operate, that's going to create more of a barrier, because you got to get them on board, haven't you?
Yeah, and there's other issues as well. Obviously, that non-standard RP might be going for grant funding from Homes England,
Yeah.
to which there's obviously process and requirements for them to obviously get that grant funding. And again, it comes down to timescales. Is
Yeah.
when is that grant funding going to come through, and will they be able to meet their contractual commitments with the actual developer who's selling the affordable housing to them?
Yeah, and I guess, to be honest, that comes down to funding and financing generally, doesn't it? Because if they're being financed privately, by a private lender, you've got to satisfy lender requirements there, any inquiries, and again, you're talking about deadlines and probably inflexibility in terms of the agreements, because your developer is going to have a set of requirements, but no doubt a financer or a lender will have a set of requirements as well, and you're going to butt heads at some point.
Yeah, and they might have more stringent requirements, to be honest with you, that take a long time to actually come to a solution, which obviously causes contractual delays, contractual breaches that then have to be ironed out.
Okay. So ultimately, how can we, or as lawyers, really, how can we assist in mitigating any challenges presented by accepting those offers from non-standard RPs, and make that process smoother?
Yeah, so I've talked about financial covenant strength with the previous question, to be honest with you, and that being a risk factor. So obviously, what we can do is talk a house builder through some of the protections in terms of to mitigate any financial risks that the non-standard RP may pose, such as guarantees from other associated companies of that non-standard RP, maybe charges, retentions, that kind of thing, and just really providing solutions that, should that non-standard RP not perform, at least there's some security there to assist the house builder going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's dead simple stuff, isn't it? Like, providing that document up front and early doors, as well as sort of the key requirements for the developer, so that everybody knows straight away, right, these are key elements that you RP need to satisfy, and whether or not that's actually acceptable at that point, so that we don't get further down the line, generally just before sign off, and realise that there's a problem.
Yeah, and I think obviously we started to do this a lot more now and see these non-standard RPs entering the market. So we can use our specialist sector knowledge to see if those non-standard RPs are performing on those contracts, and then just raise any concerns that we may have at an early stage with our clients.
No, that sounds good. So what do we think then in terms of the future? What does that hold for affordable housing delivery and sales, do we think?
So obviously we've now got a Labour government, and there's been a big push on obviously housing delivery, and in particular affordable housing delivery. So obviously they've looked at the social rent settlement, which is obviously relates to rent increases in social housing agreements with tenants. Obviously what Labour initially proposed to introduce as a 5-year social rent settlement, but what industry experts have said is that a 10-year social rent settlement will probably provide a little bit more comfort and confidence to house builders and other stakeholders in the industry, that rents will increase 1% every year in line with the consumer price index. And with a 5-year social rent settlement, I've got some facts and figures for you here, Lucy, that will obviously generate 37 billion over the next
Right.
5 years, but a 10-year social rent settlement is 72 billion. So
Oh,
obviously
wow.
that gives affordable providers the capacity to actually take on any new affordable housing that a developer ends up delivering. Another push from
Okay.
government and is the Section 106 Affordable Housing Clearing Service. What that is basically a provision that's been set up by Homes England, gives house builders the ability to connect with buyers to obviously dispose of uncontracted and unsold affordable homes in England that have obviously already been built. This gives obviously greater visibility to both the house builder and the RPs of where they can take on affordable housing that's been delivered and is ready to be sold to RPs, basically.
Okay, well that sounds good on paper, but I guess we'll have to see what that looks like in practice. But I think we're probably likely to see more non-standard RPs coming forward, aren't we? On the basis that these initiatives are there to hopefully drive some of those sales.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest with you, I think it's just give the obviously house builders the most amount of options in terms of bids to make schemes more viable. Obviously, in this country, we are in a housing crisis, so to obviously get sites delivered more quickly, they need to be viable to house builders moving forward.
Yeah.
And affordable housing plays a big part in that.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, thanks, Joe, for that discussion. If you do have any queries, please get in touch with us. We're always here to help. Thanks.